let's just say we'll share the time, okay? You go ahead. And then after a while, I'll talk about some of the other ones, okay?
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Oh, you'll be
Uh,
great. You'll be great.
You have Emperor of Ice Cream.
Okay.
Douglas, can
Eh?
I ask you? I always have to ask Ann this. Do you want to do a screen share? Because if so, I need to get set up.
I don't have a screen to share. I sent um
No,
I s-
I'll do it for you if you tell me what poem. It's the question is whether you
oh
want us to
surface
see the poem.
uh so you have the PDF I sent?
Uh, I that one I don't have booted up, so I'll have
Okay.
to get that. I have what Ann sent, the Wallace one and two.
Yeah, these are
I mean
different.
Stevens one and two.
Oh, these are the different ones that Douglas sent.
Well,
The
wait a minute.
s-
I
the
can get it
surface of
though.
Do you
surface of
guys,
the eh?
Douglas, you want to wait till next time?
Sure.
Okay. The reluctant teacher.
And
Okay, Leslie.
just another just similar technical question. Did you send in your
Thank you.
second
Thank you.
post something that copies what Doug said,
No,
or is his is
no,
completely different?
this is completely
Okay,
different. Yeah,
okay.
my second post starts with the book Ideas of Order, which contains the really famous poem Ideas of Order at Key West. And then it's just a selection of poems all the way to the end of Stevens's collected poems. Okay. But it does not include the poems that Douglas wanted us to talk about. I figured those are not poems that I know really that well. And so I'm just going to assume that he wants to tell us what he wants to tell us about him. But if you want to wait till next time, then you can send it to Tony and he can get it ready to be looked at. Because especially sea surface would be pretty hard to follow if you couldn't be looking at it. You know what I mean? Does that
Good
make sense?
plan.
Yes.
Okay, we'll do that.
I can forward them to Tony. I have them right here.
Okay, so hi, Leslie. Let's start with the Emperor
Of ice cream.
of Ice Cream, which you guys have all been grooving out on already.
Now, Ann, do you want me to post them?
Let's not for this one. Maybe later
Okay.
if something gets difficult. The Emperor of Ice Cream. As I told you guys, my dissertation director's little 2-year-old named his favorite doll the Emperor of Ice Cream, um, which is like so completely dorky and so wonderful. Call the roller of big cigars, the muscular one, and bid him whip in kitchen cups, concupiscent curds. Let the wenches dawdle in such dress as they are used to wear, and let the boys bring flowers in last month's newspapers. Let thee be finale of soon. The only emperor is the emperor of ice cream. Take from the dresser of deal, lacking the 3 glass knobs, that sheet on which she embroidered fantails once, and spread it so as to cover her face. If her horny feet protrude, they come to show how cold she is, and dumb. Let the lamp affix its beam. The only emperor is the emperor of ice cream. It was a wonderful poem. Leslie, why did you want us to wait until you could be with us?
Leslie's mute. Oh,
Well,
there you go.
I'm unmuted now. Because it was puzzling me at first. And I did some looking, and somebody said it took them decades. Some, professional critics said it took decades for people even to think what this was about. So I was curious. I wanted to be here and I couldn't be here on Tuesday.
Yeah.
So I wanted to see what people thought.
Sex and death.
Yeah.
Sex and death, right?
But some of it you would have to know some of his his history and his being in Key West and Cuba and a few other things, I
Why
think.
do you say that?
Well, just because, who is this roller of big cigars and why is he the one making the ice cream? And And why are they being referred to as wenches? I'm not sure about Stevens and his interest in wenches and serving maids. But anyway.
Douglas?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that in Stevens lived in Connecticut, or most of the time he was in Connecticut, and Connecticut Valley, coming up through Connecticut and Massachusetts, was prime tobacco country.
Mm-hmm.
And they raised, it was mostly wrappers for like cigars for that they were raising the tobacco for. There's tobacco barns all over the place in the Connecticut
That's really
Valley.
interesting. That's
Yeah.
really interesting.
Yeah.
So I think that as we talked about Stevens last time, a lot of this is taking place in his imagination. The characters are not necessarily real. In fact, very often they're not real, you know. But he peoples his imagination with a panoply of characters. So I don't have a definitive interpretation of this poem, but I would say, okay, in the first stanza, first of all, let's just notice the shape, okay? It's a short poem, it's 16 lines, and it's very symmetrical, right? So we've got two evocations, the first stanza, the second stanza. They're very different. They are not necessarily happening in the same house, the same place. It's not necessary to assume any kind of reality factor about this. Do you know what I mean? But what we've got is characters and energies. So the roller of big cigars, the muscular one, this is like a macho man, right? You know, somebody, a swaggerer, okay? And we know that he is getting the wenches excited. Now, we don't need to know why he's in the kitchen, what he's doing in the kitchen, but we've got a scenario that's simply in the imagination. Let the wenches dawdle in such dress as they are used to wear. So we've got what, a kitchen with, you know, kind of lolling young ladies sort of hanging out. We've got boys who bring flowers in last month's newspapers. We don't need to know, I think, why they're bringing the flowers. Things are being evoked. And in poetry, they don't need to be explained. They can just be evoked and kind of resonate in your imagination. So far you've got, you know, a cast of characters. You've got this macho man, you've got this boy who's delivering flowers, but in last month's newspapers, which already I think brings on a tinge of melancholy or exhaustion or, you know, pastness, right? And then you've got these wenches and whatever they're doing, it doesn't matter. And then you've got this statement, this philosophical statement, let be finale of seem. This is similar to what Stevens is investigating in Sunday Morning, which is our desire for something absolute and final. And the reality, as Stevens sees it, that things seem, and that must be sufficient for them to be. Let be finale of seem, right? And he's going to come back to this theme over and over and over. There is no final God, there is no final heaven, there is no final order of things, but there is the imagination which evokes and celebrates, evokes imaginative things and celebrates reality. So let be finale of seem. The only emperor is the emperor of ice cream. So it's not like God is the king of heaven. It's that the emperor, this imaginary emperor, this Napoleonic figure, this swaggerer, is the emperor over something sweet that melts quickly, right? It's not going to last, just like concupiscence is not going to last, just like life is not going to last. But he's the emperor, you know, the only emperor is the emperor of ice cream. So you could say the poet is the emperor of ice cream. You could say, you know, who knows who the emperor of ice cream is? But that's what you can be the emperor of, is the emperor of ice cream, not the emperor of Rome, not the emperor of heaven, not the emperor of, you know, United States of America. Some might think differently, you know, but the only emperor is the emperor of this delicious confection that's cold and sweet and gives you pleasure, and then it's gone. Then we switch scenes, really different tonality. Take from the dresser of deal, which is to say this pine dresser, lacking the 3 glass knobs. So already it's like a old dresser missing knobs. That sheet on which she embroidered fantails once. So you think of, okay, a woman who is an embroiderer, and you know, fantails are that. It's like in the 19th century or early 20th century, um, women would embroider things. It's an old-fashioned thing to do, and they would have sheets like what I mean that you would lay on top of a dresser to decorate it, you know, cloths, okay, and spread it so as to cover her face. So why are we covering her face? Well, because she's dead. She's lying on the bed dead.
Mm.
If her horny feet protrude, i.e., the sheet isn't big enough to cover her completely, so her little feet are sticking out at the end. If her horny feet protrude, they come to show how cold she is and dumb. My students would all say, isn't that stupid? But he means speechless, quiet. She can speak no more. This whole thing is an act of speech, if you like, an act of writing. But this woman who's imagined as dead has passed beyond that. Let the lamp affix its beam, which I take to mean look. Let the lamp shine on her. Don't look away. This is an image of death. This is an image of, in a sense, poverty. And I'm thinking of Wallace Stevens at one point says the worst poverty is not to live in I can't remember it. I'm sorry, I'm going to misquote it. But it's an image of poverty, not like having no money, but of oldness, usedness, the end of life, and then death. The only emperor, he reiterates, is the emperor of ice cream. So as I said, first stanza sex, second stanza death. Emily Dickinson, toward the end of her life, her little beloved nephew died of typhoid, age 6. And she said, love and death, is there anything else? And Stevens is echoing a somewhat similar sentiment here. Not necessarily love, but, you know, libido. Eros and Thanatos. This is Eros in the first stanza, Thanatos in the second. Right? So yeah, it comes at us as a really hard poem. You know, it's like, what the hell is he talking about? But again, just read it a bunch of times and think about, okay, what's happening? And especially like, how's it structured? How do the two halves of it play off against each other? The second stanza is a lot easier to understand than the first one, you know? But I think that's the scene that's going on here. And it's like a stage play in 2 acts in a way. It's quite a wonderful poem. Yeah, Leslie.
Okay. So to add to that, or maybe a slightly different take on it, you know, when I was trying to figure out what was going on here, I came across this Poetry Foundation poetry guide
Mm-hmm.
that was written by somebody named Austin Allen in 2014. And he came to the conclusion that these are 2 scenes in the same house.
Could be downstairs and
And that
upstairs.
what it is awake
Yeah.
as it would be held in a tropical country like Cuba. And that he was pointing out the first stanza has all these images, not only of sex, but of things that are ephemeral. Like it's the flowers are in last month's newspaper because the news is also ephemeral. You know, it's news one day and it's not the next. And the take on let be finale of seem, he was thinking of perhaps, and I was thinking of be is the hard, cold facts of what it is, and seem is what people do when they're alive and how they interpret all of that. So that the seam dies when somebody dies, if you know what I mean. The second one is about death. So he was thinking that in the kitchen, you've got this big burly guy with his muscles, and the wenches are hanging around. Wenches is not a term that's used for, high class ladies. But they're hanging around, buzzing around like bees. And then in the other room, and they're not paying any attention to this body that's by itself in the bedroom, where you have this cheap furniture. And the implication he thought of the woman, I'm not sure he would have been accurate for this time period, but the people doing the embroidery might be older women and stuff. And that she's got these horny feet protruding. So, and that she is the bee. She is the thing you've got to affix your lamplight on, because this is reality. And you're sort of shedding some light on the subject. So the thing about the emperor is the emperor of ice cream. There were all sorts of thoughts about the emperor, but it's sort of like the only one in charge, perhaps, is the ephemeral quality of all life. But also, they mentioned sometimes allusions like the emperor has no clothes, that the seeming is one thing, and the being is, he's naked. He's not wearing these fine outfits. So it could have been, there are all sorts of things that could have been allusions to different things. Anyway, yeah, he said there were allusions to Keats in The Eve of St. Agnes, when Porphyro piles jellies soother than the curd before his beloved. So all these sexual things. There were all sorts of things in that, but until, I was getting the sex and the death part, but I was trying to figure out all the connections.
I gotta admit, I don't see tropical stuff here. The second stanza seems much more New England than tropical, but I just absolutely don't think it matters where. We do know that Stevens loved Florida. We do know that Stevens mostly lived in Connecticut. We know that Stevens kind of longed for the colorfulness and the warmth and the passion of Florida, and that he also embraced the kind of snowiness, as in the snowman of Connecticut. So, but I guess I think that any desire to pin this down and say, oh, this happens here or this happens here, kind of misses the point of how Stevens worked. With Williams, you can tell if Williams says Patterson, he means Patterson, New Jersey. He's not making it up. But if Stevens says, whatever, it's not necessarily going to be traceable as far as verifiable content on the face of the earth. But yeah, it's an interesting reading. Yeah, Deborah.
Thanks, first of all, for the correct pronunciation. What is it? Concupiscent?
I guess so. Concupiscent.
Okay. Yeah, I always pictured a New England home, rickety, and the dresser scarf that my mom used to have, dresser scarves, on all the dressers and covering this deceased woman. But maybe it's because of the Florida connection, but I always think about his sexuality and wonder if there's a, attraction to men, if there's that dancing circle that you talked about last week, that that Julia said Stonehenge, but it always seemed to me like a bunch of men, and fairly erotic, actually. And I think there's an allusion here to, what do you I can't say that word.
Concubine.
Men create curds, pretty,
Well,
visually.
I don't want to get, but he's whipping in. Okay, whatever. This is getting too embarrassing.
Oh, okay.
This
I'm blushing too, but
are we talking about here? Perhaps we should all go take a walk around the block.
yeah, I'm blushing too. But that,
I,
I don't know. Yeah.
yeah.
The
Yeah.
boys, he refers to the boys and flowers and all of
Yeah,
that
I
is
know.
very,
I have heard more about Stevens being somewhat aggressive than about him being, sexually attracted to men. But again, I don't know if I think it matters.
yeah, yeah.
Just yeah, Leslie.
Well, there was a quote in what I was reading that said that Stevens said about this poem that it captured something of the essential gaudiness of
Hmm.
poetry,
Hmm.
and
This
that
was he,
concupiscent was one of those gaudy words because it's not a word that you use for food. It's not a food word.
no, no.
And so and the person who I was quoting before was saying that in those tropical countries, having a party with ice cream and stuff like that for a wake is the custom. And that's why he was making the connection that because it says, festive wakes complete with rich desserts are traditional in Caribbean cultures.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that's why he
Yeah.
was making that connection.
Okay. Douglas?
Oh, I was just going to say, I want to hear, or I would like to hear if Tony has anything to say about let be finale of seam.
Yeah, the philosophical.
Um, well, yeah, sure. It resonates with Goethe and with, Heidegger, Hegel, a bunch of people. Um, the idea, well, and the existentialists, the idea that there isn't something out there that's permanent that we can latch onto. I mean, don't get me started, but yes, I made that connection as well.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it's a great poem. Any other comments before we move on?
Brian had his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Brian?
Um, Two things. I took the poem to be about the act of writing poetry, both parts.
Most things in Stevens are.
Yeah, and that I mean he stews a bunch of elements together, and that's what seems, but it suddenly it is, or which is the word be,
Hmm.
that it moves from uncertainty to certainty, and that makes it be parallel with the light affixing its beam. The light sort of lets you know exactly how things are. Um, I'm not sure that's a very profound insight. I
No,
wanted
I
to
think
ask
that's cool.
Douglas about New England funerals or wakes. It seemed to me they left the body, put the body in the dining room
mm-hmm.
and covered it with a sheet, so that
That's what I was
it's not
Or,
that there's a
yeah, or in a special parlor.
Hmm.
yeah, and so I I never sensed anything tropical about this. But I don't know about New Englanders eating ice cream at that era. So,
Vanilla ice cream sells more in the winter than any other time in the New
That is
England.
hysterical. That's great. Um,
Doug, is the following on Leslie's point, is ice cream also a kind of conventional feature of wakes in New England, do you think?
That I couldn't tell you. I doubt it. I mean, at least not from when the people used to have wakes. I mean, for the purpose of making sure the person was actually dead and wasn't going to suddenly sit up.
Sit up and
yeah.
say, "Get me
It's
out of
like the
here."
same sort of thing where they used to have a bell by the
Yeah.
grave with a string that went down to the coffin. So if the person was actually just catatonic, they'd yank on the string and it would ring the bell.
Yeah.
But that
Yeah.
was the whole purpose of a wake, was to make sure the person didn't
Give us
wake
some
up.
time.
I mean, aside from the fact of washing the body and having it at home.
Well, I want to point out one thing. I think Bryant made a really good point. The whole thing is an act of conjuring. The first word in the poem is call, and then do this, do this, do this. Okay. So the whole poem is being spun out of nothing, out of imagination, out of words. And then you have, a complete, pretty perfect little 16-line poem. Um, And it's as if he's speaking to himself too. I mean, you do this as a reader, do this, do this, do this. But speaking to the internal paramour, or speaking to the imagination, or speaking to Puella Parvula, he calls his own imagination many different things. Do this, create this, and then we have it, And Stevens did say that this was his favorite of all of his poems, which is pretty interesting.
Wow.
Okay. I wanted to read The Death of a Soldier.
Question. I have a question for
Hey, Gary,
Douglas.
sorry.
Yeah, is that the bell in the coffin? Is that the origin of the phrase "dead ringer"?
Oh, that could be.
Ooh, that's
That could
hysterical.
be.
Although that means to look exactly like somebody else.
It's
know.
true, but you could, that makes sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I was raised a Christian Scientist, and it was always by non-Christian scientists reputed that Mary Baker Eddy had a phone line to her coffin so that when she woke up, she could call the Mother Church when she was ready to be resurrected and come get them out. It's like, okay, whatever, Okay, let's move on. I want to talk about The Death of a Soldier. Mostly, I just want to read it because I think it's one of Stevens's most accessible poems. It's simple in a really nice way, but it has this amazing, amazing image that ends the poem. The death of a soldier. Life contracts and death is expected, as in a season of autumn. The soldier falls. He does not become a 3 days personage, imposing his separation, calling for pomp. Death is absolute and without memorial, as in a season of autumn when the wind stops. When the wind stops, and over the heavens the clouds go nevertheless in their direction. It's a really beautiful poem, So he does not become a 3 days personage. Again, Stevens emphasizing what he emphasizes so often. This is a mortal human being. It is not an immortal human being. He does not impose his separation or call for pomp. He does not make us aware that he is unlike others. He does not require pomp. There is no pomp about this situation. He's simply a dead soldier. And we realize that Stevens wrote, Harmonium was published in 1923. So this is a World War I poem, right? And then this absolute statement, death is absolute and without memorial. But then it starts opening. The last two stanzas are all one sentence, whereas the first stanza and the second stanza, um, the first stanza has a sentence as line 3, the soldier falls. Okay. The second stanza ends with a period. It's end stopped. And then you open up and the image starts spiraling in a way, starts turning back on itself. Death is absolute and without memorial, as in the season of autumn when the wind stops, and over the heavens the clouds go nevertheless in their direction. I think that is beautiful image, which I would prefer not to even try to explain, but just try to experience. So the wind stops, but over the heavens, the clouds continue to move, And I don't want to try to paraphrase that because I just think it's really mysterious and really lovely and opens us beyond a kind of finality of the grave. But of what nature, I would not ever be able to say. So I'm going to give you guys the choice. We can either look at 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird or The Man Whose Pharynx Was Bad. Which do you prefer? Somebody has to open.
I'm always fond of 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird.
Okay, let's do it. 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird. 1. Among 20 snowy mountains, the only moving thing was the eye of the blackbird. 2. I was of 3 minds, like a tree in which there are 3 blackbirds. 3. The blackbird whirled in the autumn winds. It was a small part of the pantomime. 4. A man and a woman are one. A man and a woman and a blackbird are one. 5. I do not know which to prefer, the beauty of inflections or the beauty of innuendos, the blackbird whistling or just after. 6. Icicles filled the long window with barbaric glass. The shadow of the blackbird crossed it to and fro. The mood traced in the shadow an indecipherable cause. 7. O thin men of Haddam, why do you imagine golden birds? Do you not see how the blackbird walks around the feet of the women about you? 8. I know noble accents and lucid, inescapable rhythms, but I know too that the blackbird is involved in what I know. 9. When the blackbird flew out of sight, it marked the edge of one of many circles. 10. At the sight of blackbirds flying in a green light, even the bawds of euphony would cry out sharply. 11. He rode over Connecticut in a glass coach. Once a fear pierced him in that he mistook the shadow of his equipage for blackbirds. 12. The river is moving. The blackbird must be flying. 13. It was evening all afternoon. It was snowing, and it was going to snow. The blackbird sat in the cedar limbs. So it's a pretty brilliant poem. It's also been imitated by creative writing students 1.5 billion times, But I mentioned last time that Stevens was a connoisseur of Asian art. And so obviously we see the influence of the haiku here. These are not haiku per se, but they are haiku-like in that they are imagistic. I mentioned also, we talked a little bit about imagism when we talked about Williams's early poetry. So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow. Just the presentation of an image without either any or very much commentary or interpretation, so that the image is really carrying the weight here. And many of these are sort of short imagist poems. Among 20 snowy mountains, the only moving thing was the eye of the blackbird. So visually striking, white, 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 receding into the depths of white, 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 and then one black pinprick, like a little bead, little seed, which is the seed of the blackbird's eye, I mean, it's quite wonderful, that one. But then you get a more, kind of philosophical statement or a kind of meditative statement. I was of 3 minds, like a tree in which there are 3 blackbirds. It's also kind of a joke because we say I was of 2 minds about that. But what if you're of 3 minds about something, and then you find an image for that one? I was of 3 minds, like a tree in which there are 3 blackbirds. So what I want to suggest is this: Stevens, in this poem and in a couple other poems that I can think of too, is really interested in a sense, holding an object. You can imagine holding an object literally, but he's doing it in his mind's eye, and then moving it around so that you see different facets of it, so that your mind can approach it in different ways, so that you're not trying to make a global picture about it. You're not trying to say, this is everything I would say about the blackbird, It's like, well, what's the 14th way of looking at a blackbird? What is the essence of looking at a blackbird? That we don't have that. We don't need that. We have refractions, we have facets, we have momentary approaches to something. And they have a lot of variety in different ways, right? The blackbird whirled in the autumn winds. It was a small part of the pantomime. A pantomime a play that's being acted out through gesture rather than through words. What is that play? What is that drama that's being acted out by the autumn wind, by the blackbird without words? And then one of my favorites, a man and a woman are one. We often say that, that's the whole wedding ritual. A man and a woman and a blackbird are one. That's a deep ego statement, right? It opens that statement about human love to a statement about the interconnected nature of everything in the cosmos. A man and a woman and a blackbird are one. I think that's really wonderful. And then we have Stevens musing about poetry and its relationship to, you know, flesh to be reality. I do not know which to prefer. The beauty of inflections or the beauty of innuendos. The blackbird whistling or just after when it's echoing in your inner ear. And then you've got the way the blackbird can be seen to open into mystery, the indecipherable cause. What might that be? Icicles filled the long window with barbaric glass. So a very different kind of scene here, kind of frightening scene. The shadow of the blackbird crossed it to and fro. The shadow of the blackbird. Yeah, Douglas?
Yeah, the house that I grew up in Rochester, New York, there was a window at the top of the stairs where, because of the way the roof was above it, would have this huge icicle
Yeah.
that was, 2 or 3 feet wide because it was just coming down.
Oh,
And it would fill the whole window, the whole long window, because the house was built in the 1870s,
yeah.
and it was, and so, but you could see things through this curtain
That is
of
so
icicles.
strange.
So that's just an amazingly evocative um, piece.
It is absolutely the mood traced in the shadow and indecipherable cause. To me, that's a really terrifying stanza. Like, what is the shadow of a blackbird that you see, dimly through the glass, through the ice, right? Um, to and fro, to and fro. What's the blackbird doing? And it's so filmic. It would be a beautiful, beautiful image in a film, somebody sitting up in that attic looking at that window. And then, oh, thin men of Haddam. I always thought this was some kind of Near Eastern bazaar, Haddam. And I imagined these thin men, in their robes walking around. And Peter goes, no, it's a town in, what is it, Connecticut?
It's a town in Connecticut.
And I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. But look at what language can make us think, what it can evoke. It's
It's
not
also a town in Iran.
okay, so both places. Oh, thin men in Haddam. Why do you imagine golden birds? And there you think of Yeats's Golden Bird, the golden bird that sings of the past, the present, and the future. But the golden bird is not a living bird. And so Yeats ends up choosing the living bird. Do you not see how the blackbird walks around the feet of the women about you? Why do you need the golden bird? You got the blackbird. You got the women right here. You got the blackbird. You got the town. And why are they thin? Well, are they ascetic or are they, nerdy? Or are they?
They're just weazened old codgers.
Yeah, yeah. But they could be weazened old young codgers too.
It's true.
I mean, it is true that Stevens suffered from being fat and was put on medical diets over and over in his life, you know. But thin men is just so evocative. It's like, what makes them thin? Why are they not, brawny, muscular ones? And why are they imagining this golden bird, which is not what they have? It's not the real food they can eat. It's not the real pleasures they can have. It's not the real street they can walk on. It's,
Then they wouldn't be thin.
yeah. And then again, thinking about a little bit beautiful brag on his own poetry and no noble accents and lucid, inescapable rhythms. And you're like, damn right you do. We're listening to them. But I know too that the blackbird is involved in what I know. So it's not just musicality that takes us away from reality. It's not just escapism, although there is, I think, a really large escapist element in Stevens's poetry because he felt his own life, his actual life, to be really pretty dreary in some ways, you know? But he had this incredibly rich inner life, his imaginative life. And then you get something thinking about, okay, where are the edges? God is defined by St. Augustine as a circle, the center of which is everywhere, and the circumference of which is nowhere. Well, this is tracing a circumference. When a blackbird flew out of sight, it marked the edge of one of many circles. There are many circles. The blackbird's eye is a circle. The horizon is a circle, but it's not the only circle. You change your stance, you've got a different horizon, you've got a different circle, you know? So we're in the world of unfinalities. Yeah, very.
You think of the line from the Beatles song, Blackbird Singing at the Edge of Night.
Yeah, I know. Such a beautiful song. At the sight of blackbirds flying in a green light, even the bawds of euphony would cry out sharply. So you think about color there. Stevens is a great poet of color. And here you've got the black, black, black of the blackbird, and then the green, green, green of green light. What is this green light? Is it storm light? Is it aurora? You know, he titles one of his books Auroras of Autumn. So you've got this visually stunning color image here. Even the bawds of euphony, those who like everything to be kind of pretty and harmonious, would cry out sharply, oh, like that. Ah, you know? And there's some kind of finality to that image too. And then we've got, he rode over Connecticut in a glass coach. And you're like, whoa, this is like Cinderella. This is like, whatever, but it's also just a car. He rode over Connecticut in a glass coach. Once a fear pierced him in that he mistook the shadow of his equipage for blackbirds. And now the blackbirds are the pursuers, the fates. Yeah,
Yeah, it just now occurred to me that a glass coach could also be a hearse.
it could be, but he's still capable of being afraid,
This is true.
So whatever, it's another of those kind of wonderful images that, I mean, Stevens, it's like little tiny kids. Not everything is going to make sense, you know? But it's again, the evocative qualities of this poem are stunning. The river is moving. The blackbird must be flying. Kind of divine illogic there. The river is moving. The blackbird must be flying. And immediately you're like, well, not necessarily, but if this, then this, or, as above, so below, or as below, so above, these correspondences between the layers or the tiers or the natures of reality. And then finally, another haiku-like imagistic poem. It was evening all afternoon. It was snowing and it was going to snow. Oh, I stole those lines once in a poem. It was snowing and it was going to snow. Just realized it. The blackbird sat in the cedar limbs. And there we are again with the blackbird in the middle of all that white. Yeah. Douglas.
It's going to be evening all the afternoon today too, because it's getting ready to rain. But a lot of times when we're going to have a snowstorm, it'll be dim all afternoon until the evening. It just slides into the night.
Yeah.
So this is one of my favorite images in this poem.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful. And of course, up north, which is where you are, the sun never rises that far above the horizon in the winter.
It stays below the level of our pine trees all winter.
Yeah. I mean, I remember I spent one winter in Switzerland and one winter in Sweden. And it's like it would get light at 9:30 in the morning, sort of, and dark at 4:30 in the afternoon. And the sun would just kind of crawl across the horizon like this, So that Emily Dickinson's poem, there's a certain slant of light winter afternoons that oppresses like the heft of cathedral tunes. That's a northern image, Yeah.
The other thing would be the to realize is that in Connecticut, New England, the red-winged blackbird is one of the very earliest birds that comes back, migrates into the spring, and they sit in any marshland, and make a sound like a rusty gate, but it's like, oh, spring is here when you hear the red-winged blackbirds.
Nice. But do you have also just crow blackbirds, blackbird,
Well, we have grackles.
Okay, yeah, grackles.
Blackbirds, it's pretty much around here, it's red-winged blackbirds.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say it's like that here right now. It's about noon and it's snowing lightly and it could be 5 p.m.
Yeah.
It looks, and the day is going to slip into the evening. And those last two stanzas to me just are so evocative of, nature goes
Yeah,
on, whether we observe it or not.
exactly.
The blackbirds, they might be flying, the river's moving. It's all just kind of cruising along, whether,
But we're not seeing any blackbirds at the
well,
moment.
I saw one this morning fly.
They
Yeah.
are here though. They
Yeah.
don't go, I guess they don't go south. Because we saw a lot of them yesterday.
Yeah, we
Nice.
did. I think I also was wondering where this was in the timeline of his poetry writing, because it's so different from the circus atmosphere of The Emperor of Ice Cream. I mean, it's kind of zen,
Yeah, I know. Well, it's published in Harmonium, which is 1923. That's his first book. But he was already 45 years old when he published that first book. So he'd been writing poetry. He stopped for several years after his daughter was born. So there were some gaps, but he was writing poetry fairly steadily in the 20s and the teens, and the years up to 1910. I'm really bad at math. But so, it's considered to be like, quote, early, but for Stevens, early isn't early, you know? So Harmonium is already a really mature, book of a person is already in early middle age. But yeah, I mean, and the tone of Emperor of Ice Cream is completely different from the tone of Death of a Soldier, and completely different from Sunday Morning, and kind of similar to Bantams in Pine Woods, which is just a great sound performance. He's got a lot of variety, especially in his early, quote, early work, a lot of tonal variety. And it keeps on to some extent, but his themes become more predictably themes about poetry, themes about the imagination and its relationship to reality, and poetry and its relationship to the kind of final truth that could be known, which is to say, there is no final truth that can be known, you know. Gosh. And I mean, Stevens, was his collected poems is 532 pages long. That's a lot of poetry. And so it's a copious output over a lifetime, especially given that he had a full-time job this whole time too, you know.
It's kind of interesting too, like Dickinson, I mean, I don't know that much about his personal life, but it seems like after the drudgery of working in an insurance office all day and then coming home and writing that volume of poems all night, there wasn't a lot of, European travel and so on and so forth. And it seems like in a way like her, he had a sort of cloistered life and used his imagination to enrich his own life.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Stephen's personal life was not very happy. His marriage was not a happy marriage. And I know very little about his wife, except that I know that his parents opposed the wedding in the first place because she was of a much lower social class. I know that they were married for 15 years before they had a child. Yeah, Douglas.
Yeah, just a little factoid. She was, they say that she was a model for the Mercury
Yeah,
dime and
yeah,
for the standing Mercury half dollar.
yeah. Yeah, so she's apparently quite beautiful.
Hmm.
But one source said that she started having some mental illness problems. And another source said, from this time on, they had really completely separate bedrooms, and he had his own kind of study where he would go at night and, read and drink fine tea and learn about Asian art and write poetry. And he had, like Williams, a kind of bifurcated social life. I mean, Williams was a doctor among doctors, but he was also a kind of scrappy poet among poets. And so I think I told you guys that anecdote about his funeral when he had both all the kind of fine folk of Rutherford around the grave, and then here come all these beat poets, pouring out of their jalopies to attend the funeral rites, and Stevens had his artist friends who were really important to him and his artistic interests and contacts, but he also stuck with the insurance business, rose to be vice president of this really important insurance firm. And I've seen pictures of his house. It's a really big, fancy house, it's a lot of money. Yeah. Yeah, Brian.
Briefly, I've been thinking about the connection between Wallace Stevens and the composer Charles Ives.
Hmm.
Ives was a Yale man, and he anticipated many of the modernist developments of 20th century music.
Yeah.
Unlike Stevens, though, Ives worked in almost complete musical isolation.
Uh-huh.
He was greatly criticized, and in his mid-20s, decided that he wasn't going to make a living at all in music.
Yeah.
And he became an insurance man, and he invented estate planning and became very wealthy.
Estate planning.
Yes.
Wow. That's
And,
crazy.
um,
Yeah.
and he went home at night and he wrote music. He wrote
Yeah.
4 symphonies and 114 songs. He supported other composers without letting them know.
Uh-huh.
He first heard his third symphony in 1948 after he had stopped writing music 30 years before.
That's
He
so
heard it on the
crazy.
radio. He heard his second symphony for the first time in 1953, also on the radio when Leonard Bernstein conducted it. His view, though, was not his aesthetic was a view of the past. His texture is always based on Civil War songs and hymns and things like that, popular ditties of his father's era. His father was an important musician to him and trained him in music.
Huh.
So it's some important differences there, um, but
Five.
some of the same background.
Yeah. And I mean, Williams too. Williams decided, he says in his autobiography, that he was never going to make any money as a writer, and he was not going to kowtow to popular tastes in order to make money as a writer. So he became a doctor. Way to make money, support a family, and have the artistic life that you can muster up the energy to have. Yeah. Yeah, Douglas.
Yeah, and do you know the poem "Nuances of a Theme" by Williams? He wrote he wrote a variations on.
I do. I do. Yeah. I wanted to read you really quickly The Man Whose Pharynx Was Bad. This is a poem, uh, well, about that kind of depression that sets in, you know. The time of year has grown indifferent. Mildew of summer and the deepening snow are both alike in the routine I know. I am too dumbly in my being pent. The wind attendant on the solstices blows on the shutters of the metropoles, stirring no poet in his sleep, and tolls the grand ideas of the villages. The malady of the quotidian. Perhaps if winter once could penetrate through all its purples to the final slate, persisting bleakly in an icy haze, one might in turn become less diffident, out of such mildew plucking neater mold and spouting new orations of the cold. One might but time will not relent. I really like that poem. It's a mood poem, right? It's a poem about being too dumbly in my being pent, stuck in your own self. The cold never gets cold enough to become an absolute state of being. It's just snowy. In the summer, it's mildewy. The mildew never blossoms into any great final thing. You know, one might in turn become less diffident. And that's such a touching word there. Less diffident. Out of such mildew, plucking neater mold and spouting new orations of the cold. It's like how to come up with something grand, how to come up with something final, either out of heat or out of cold. And then this great last line, one might, but time will not relent. Kind of a gloomy poem. He's got some great gloomy poems, you know? So, any final comments or thoughts? Alan, you've been super quiet. We can't hear you. You don't have any sound.
No.
Alan is mute. He's talking to us, but he's lip. Wait, I'm not. Okay, yeah. Otis, how about you? Unmute. Unmute.
Unmute.
I was gonna make the comment about the Paul McCartney Blackbird song, but Barry beat me to it. That's my contribution for today.
Uh-huh.
But
Okay.
I love these poems.
Yeah, they're pretty amazing. And Laurel was holding up a picture of a blackbird. Yeah,
Yeah, hang on a second. I will bring the picture back. The last of the little things, there's the little blackbird on a cedar branch.
that's really nice.
And that was just because I was listening and I had to run over 2 feet to my little art table. And
Yeah, that's really lovely. That's beautiful. Yeah, which reminds us also of calligraphy, you know, which
oh,
reminds me of circles, how the Zen master will practice for 20 years to draw a circle. Which reminds me, totally off the subject, are you guys following those amazing Zen priests who are walking from Fort Worth to DC? Are you
Yeah.
following that? You have got to check it out. Douglas, you've got to check that out. There's like, what, 23 of them or so on, and they're literally walking on a peace march with their dog Akota, who now has 200,000 Facebook followers. Their dog Akota, people think was probably a pariah dog that they got in India on another peace march. And they're walking and they're stopping. Now they're, I think, in North Carolina, but they came through Mississippi, but not where I was. They came down farther south and then over to Alabama. They crossed the Selma Bridge that where John Lewis got his head caved in. And they came up through Georgia. And in Decatur, there were 3,000 people who came to sit. They held a kind of you know, talk, and there were like 3,000 people who came to sit. And everywhere they go, people are lining the roads. They have now a police escort because sadly, when they were first starting, a truck didn't realize how slowly their vehicle that accompanies them was going and ran into it. And it ran into one of the monks, and they had to take his leg off. So the monk, you can find all this if you're on Facebook. It's like it's really actively on Facebook, and it's just so beautiful to watch what's going on while the rest of what's going on is going on. And if you're along their route, which probably none of you are, and I'm not either, but then you could go, and yeah. Okay, guys, thank you. So Douglas, you're gonna start us out next time. Okay, good. Have a good few days, you guys. See you next time. And I
Thanks,
did
Ann.
do that other bunch of Wallace Stevens poems. Thanks, everybody.
Sure,
Thank you,
Ed.
Dan.
Bye bye.